if you reach into your pocket or, your wallet right now, there is a remarkably high chance you are carrying a portrait of the man we are analyzing today.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. I mean, you see his face when you hand over $1 for a coffee. You hear his name every single time the news cuts to our nation's capital.
Yeah, it's literally everywhere.
It is. And you probably grew up absorbing these pristine, almost folklore-level stories about his flawless honesty.
Right, the whole cherry tree thing.
Exactly. But, when a human being is transformed into a towering monument, an entire state, an everyday currency, you kind of have to wonder who is actually buried underneath all that marble and myth.
That is the big question.
So welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping straight in today with a very specific mission. We've got a snack of excerpts here from The Immortal Legacy of George Washington, and we are completely bypassing the standard, polished textbook narrative.
Good, because that stuff usually misses the point anyway.
Right. We want to figure out how a singular historical figure operates simultaneously as an enduring myth, an international symbol of liberation, and, well, a deeply, intensely scrutinized human being.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Washington consistently tops presidential polls today.
He really does. It's the ultimate historical paradox.
Yeah.
Because for anyone listening who wants to understand not just history, but how history is manufactured, I mean, Washington is the definitive case study in how a nation constructs its own identity.
Oh, for sure.
We were looking at the architecture of American myth-making,
Yeah.
and how the blueprints for that myth were drawn up almost the second the man stopped breathing.
Well, let's talk about that immediate aftermath, because the foundation for that invincibility, it was laid in 1799.
Oh, right.
Virginia's governor, Henry Lee III, delivers this defining eulogy. And he famously calls Washington first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen.
Such a famous line. Right, but that isn't just a polite tribute at a funeral. That is the establishment of a national idol. He set a baseline of absolute, unquestionable reverence.
Which, you have to remember, was a highly deliberate political choice.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. The nation was still incredibly fragile at that point. But what happens next is even more vital to the myth.
Okay.
So in 1809, Mason Locke Weems publishes his biography of Washington.
Ah, Weems.
Right. And this text is pure hagiography. I mean, it treats Washington less like a politician and more like a secular saint.
Oh.
Yeah, Weems is the one who popularized the cherry tree story, the whole I cannot tell a lie narrative.
See, I have to push back on Weems and his methods here because reading the sources, Weems operates more like an early 19th century public relations agent than a real historian.
That's a fair assessment, yeah.
I mean, the cherry tree story has never been proven or disproven. Historian Ron Chernow points out that Weems was actively attempting to foster enduring myths to inspire patriotism and morality. But doesn't this entirely backfire? I mean, if you invent a famously unproven story as a PR tool to inspire patriotism, aren't you essentially erasing the real man?
Well,
Like you're replacing a complex leader with a two-dimensional cartoon of virtue?
what's fascinating here is that you are looking at it from the perspective of a modern historian who values factual nuance.
Guilty as charged.
Right. But Weems was writing for a fragile, deeply divided new country. Washington was the leader of the first successful revolution against a massive colonial empire.
Right, a huge deal.
Exactly. He was an international symbol of liberation. But domestically, the young United States was an experiment that could have shattered into regional factions at any moment.
Oh, I see.
They did not want a nuanced, flawed politician.
Yeah.
They desperately needed a unifying superhero.
A superhero.
Yeah, that idealized hagiographic version of Washington was the psychological anchor the populace required to believe the American experiment was even legitimate.
Okay, I see the utility in 1809. But the reverence, it doesn't just stick, it aggressively compounds over time.
Oh, it really does.
Because by 1879, Congress proclaims his birthday a federal holiday. And if we look at the historical context of 1879, we're in the post-Civil War era.
Exactly.
The country had quite literally torn itself apart. So once again, the government reaches back for that psychological anchor, using Washington to force a fractured nation to remember a time when they were united.
Precisely. The myth is deployed whenever the institutions of the country feel threatened.
Which perfectly explains a detail from the sources that is genuinely staggering to me.
Oh, the promotion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen to this. Washington's military promotions did not end in the 18th century.
Wait till you hear this.
Right, so in 1976, during the American Bicentennial, President Gerald Ford posthumously appointed him General of the Armies of the United States.
Unbelievable.
And Ford specifically stated that Washington would rank first among all officers of the Army, past and present.
No one can ever outrank him.
Never. The paperwork for this was made official on March 13th, 1978. So almost 2 centuries after the man died, the U.S. military is doing administrative paperwork to ensure that nobody in the future could ever outrank him.
But consider the cultural atmosphere of 1976.
Okay.
The United States is coming out of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal.
Oh, right. Trust was totally broken.
Exactly. Trust in the military and the executive branch is at a historic low. So Gerald Ford utilizes the bicentennial to invoke the ultimate symbol of uncorrupted military and executive authority.
That makes so much sense.
By officially promoting him to General of the Armies, the United States was retroactively ensuring the symbolic father of the country could never be subordinate to a modern 5-star general. It is the literal, bureaucratic enforcement of his godlike status.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That word godlike, it changes the entire dynamic of how we viewed him today.
It absolutely does.
Because historian John Ferling notes in our sources that Washington remains the only founder and president ever to be referred to as godlike.
The only one.
But because he was placed on that impossibly high pedestal, his character draws the most severe, relentless scrutiny of any American historical figure.
Oh, yeah.
When you build a myth that pristine, any human flaw feels like a massive betrayal.
It does, though. Many historians argue that the pedestal was earned through a staggering amount of personal willpower.
Really? Like who?
Well, David Hackett Fisher looks at the scrutiny and defends Washington's core character, defining it through the lens of profound discipline.
Discipline.
Yeah, Fisher points to virtues like integrity, self-discipline, courage, absolute honesty, resolve, and decision, balanced with forbearance, decency, and respect for others.
That is a long list of virtues.
Right, but Fisher's arguing that the reverence wasn't just a PR invention by Weems. It was the result of a man who held himself to incredibly rigorous behavioral standards in an era where power usually corrupted completely.
And Fisher's focus on self-control totally makes sense when you look at the macro survival of the Republic. But when you zoom in on the reality of his actual policies, the picture shatters.
It really does.
And, as your guides through this material, I want to remind everyone listening that our goal is not to take sides. We are impartially showing you the full spectrum of the historiography. We're looking at a deeply conflicting historical record.
Completely conflicting.
And nowhere is that historical record more violently split than in Washington's legacy regarding Native Americans.
Yeah, the sources present 2 fundamentally different realities here, and the way historians interpret his motives couldn't be further apart.
Let's examine the first perspective. So Ron Chernow argues that Washington tried to be even-handed in his dealings with indigenous peoples.
Okay.
According to Chernow, Washington hoped Native Americans would abandon their itinerant hunting lifestyles and adapt to fixed agricultural communities.
So, assimilation.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's an assimilationist view, where Washington wanted indigenous populations to mirror white settlers. But Chernow insists Washington never advocated for the outright confiscation of tribal land or the forcible removal of tribes.
Right. But then you turn to historian Colin G. Calloway, and you are met with a completely different landscape.
Oh, completely.
Calloway asserts that Washington had a lifelong obsession with acquiring Indian land, driven both by personal wealth generation and the expansionist demands of the new nation.
Obsession is a strong word.
It is. Calloway argues that Washington initiated policies with devastating effects in Indian country. When Native American populations resisted this dispossession, Calloway states Washington felt he had no choice but to extirpate them.
Extirpate.
Yeah, he believed the military expeditions sent to systematically destroy Indian towns were entirely justified.
And Calloway's use of the word extirpate is chilling. I mean, it literally means to completely root out and destroy.
Yes, it does.
How do 2 highly regarded historians look at the exact same era and arrive at even-handed assimilation on one side and obsession and extirpation on the other?
It's wild.
It just highlights the immense difficulty of analyzing a man who held the power of a nation in his hands. Every signature on a piece of paper had generational consequences.
It reveals the tension between the intent of the statesman and the reality of the policy.
Right.
Washington may have written privately about preferring peaceful expansion, but the physical growth of the nation fundamentally demanded dispossession. The machinery of the country he built required that land.
And grappling with the machinery of the country he built leads directly into the paradox of slavery.
Yes.
Washington, along with other founding fathers, is heavily criticized for holding enslaved people. This was the economic engine of his life at Mount Vernon.
And the sources highlight a profound, agonizing contradiction in his behavior.
How so?
Well, Washington explicitly expressed the desire to see the abolition of slavery through legislation. Privately, he stated he wanted the institution to end.
Okay, privately.
Right? But publicly, as the most powerful, influential, godlike unifier in the country, he did not initiate or support a single legislative initiative to bring about its end.
Wow.
He possessed unprecedented leverage, and he chose inaction.
I just struggle to reconcile that gap. I mean, he had the political capital to bind 13 disparate colonies together, yet he claimed he couldn't push the needle on human bondage.
It's a massive contradiction.
And this specific inaction is the crucible of modern criticism. It's the primary driver behind contemporary movements calling to remove his name from public buildings and to take down his statues from public squares.
Exactly.
This raises an important question. How do you hold both of these realities in your head at the same time? The leader who held a fracturing nation together with unmatched integrity, and the man who actively participated in and benefited from a brutal, systemic injustice.
Well, this raises an important question for all of us. It forces you to abandon the comfort of binary thinking.
Right. Good guys versus bad guys.
Right. Weems trained the American public to view Washington as a flawless saint. Modern critics often want to view them as a calculated villain.
Yeah.
The reality is that he was a man trapped within his own era's economic and moral failings while simultaneously trying to build a political framework that would outlast him.
That's a lot to carry.
But when you talk about removing his name or statues, you run into an unprecedented logistical reality. His cultural and physical footprint is so deeply woven into the continent that extracting him is almost inconceivable.
I mean, you can debate a policy, but how do you debate a 555-foot piece of marble?
You really can't.
The Washington Monument was dedicated on February 21st, 1885. It sits right in the center of the National Mall.
Just dominating the skyline.
Yeah, and when you stand at the base of that massive blank stone obelisk, you do not see a man who struggled with decisions or who failed to act on his private moral convictions. You just see immutable, unquestionable power.
That's the point of it.
Does turning a human into a colossal monolith make it entirely impossible for everyday citizens to relate to the actual history?
Well, monumental architecture is designed to intimidate, not to educate.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
And that intimidation is stamped across the entire map of the United States. I mean, he is the only president to have a state named after.
Right, Washington State.
The capital city of the nation bears his name. In the 1930s, sculptor Gutzon Borglum used dynamite to literally carve Washington's face into the side of a mountain at Mount Rushmore's Shrine of Democracy in South Dakota.
Dynamite. And consider how the scale of these monuments shifts over time, too.
What do you mean?
Well, in 1847, he was placed on the nation's very first postage stamp. It's a small, intimate, domestic acknowledgement.
Sure.
But as the United States grew into an industrial superpower, the monuments had to match that scale.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, in 1931, the George Washington Bridge opens, connecting New York City to New Jersey. They slap his name on massive steel suspension cables to legitimize modern engineering.
That's a huge shift.
It is. Add to that George Washington University in St. Louis. His home at Mount Vernon is a National Historic Landmark. His papers are preserved at the Library of Congress.
It is a geographical and institutional omnipresence. But I would argue that the massive infrastructure isn't even the most effective tool for sustaining the myth.
No. What is?
It's the everyday icons.
The pocket-sized monuments.
Exactly.
He is on the $1 bill. He is on the presidential $1 coin. He is on the $quarter coin.
Everywhere you look.
Since that first stamp in 1847, he has appeared on more United States postage stamps than any other person in history. He is entirely woven into the mundane rhythm of American commerce.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that the impulse Mason Locke Weems had in 1809 never actually went away. It merely evolved its technology.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Weems used a printing press. Borglum used granite and dynamite. The U.S. Mint uses metal dies. And today, we use the screen.
Oh, right. The sources mention a fascinating upcoming project that perfectly illustrates this.
The movie?
Yes, there is a 2026 American drama film called Young Washington being released by Angel Studios, featuring Mary Louise Parker and Kelsey Grammer.
Wow.
Over 2 centuries later, society is still casting modern actors to try and interpret his origin story. We are still obsessed with the space between the boy in the unproven cherry tree myth and the general of the armies.
Because the origin story of the founder is the origin story of the citizen. The historical scrutiny and the pop culture myth-making are happening at the exact same time.
Simultaneously.
We are rigorously tearing down the old, flawed narratives in our academic history books, while simultaneously greenlighting new dramatic narratives for our televisions.
That is so true.
Washington is not a settled historical subject. He is a continuous, active argument about what America was and what it's supposed to be.
So, what does this all mean? If we pull all these threads together, what do we actually find beneath the fluff?
Will we find a figure suspended entirely between extremes?
Yeah. He's caught between the 19th century PR campaign that branded him a god and the 21st century critical lens that demands accountability for his inaction on slavery and his devastating policies toward indigenous peoples.
The irony is that the original mythmakers, by trying to make him perfect, guaranteed that his human failings would feel like a historic betrayal to modern citizens.
Absolutely. He leaves a legacy that is hopelessly mixed, intensely analyzed, and yet permanently physically bolted to the American landscape.
You know, as we close out this analysis, I want to leave you with a thought regarding that landscape, specifically the everyday currency you interact with.
Okay, let's hear it.
We established that Washington's idealized face is passed hand to hand millions of times a day on the dollar bill and the quarter. Does that constant mundane ubiquity actually make us blind to the complicated history he represents?
Oh, wow.
When a historical figure's face just becomes the mechanism you use to buy a cup of coffee, do we stop seeing the man entirely?
Does ubiquity create invisibility? That is a profound angle to consider the next time you pull a dollar bill out of your wallet.
Definitely something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the monuments, look closely at the myths operating around you, and we will catch you next time.